Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crispy's Tavern and Tabletop Tavern Tips. Whew, that takes me back. Today, we are on our 100th episode of TTT and D&D Advice. It is crazy. Obviously, we passed this milestone countless years ago, back with RPG Horror Stories, but with D&D Advice taking longer to make, this was a slower process. But here we are at long last, and it feels kind of weird thinking that this was the series that we started the entire channel with. I mean, man, considering how big Horror Stories and the skits got on this channel, I feel like that's kind of weird to think about. But, I mean, D&D Advice has always been a big part of Crispy's Tavern. It is Crispy's Tavern D&D tips and stories after all. So I figured we'd do something special. Today, we're going to look back on the first ever episode of Crispy's Tavern, never before seen by at least some of you. It's a video on 5 DM lessons I wish I learned sooner. I've got 5 new ones for you, and then we're going to react to the old ones and see if I've changed my mind or anything like that. Without further ado, guys, welcome to TTT episode 100. Let's get started. Okay, so first lesson that I'm really glad I've learned over the years is organization is key, not just for D&D, but for my life in general. Organization is a big part of it, but for D&D, it's also not too shabby. Now, organizing your notes is all fine and dandy, but I do find myself really taking care to also organize all of my materials outside of the immediate session that I'm DMing. For example, keeping all of my monster stat blocks in neat, tidy folders based on their creature type, aberration, beast, etc. That makes it so much easier to search through a book. Having them uploaded like this is so much easier for me to look through. Obviously, this is my system. Not everyone is going to be a Google Drive person. Maybe you have another system, but I do recommend getting some kind of system in some way. Working hard on something like this is going to save you so much time in the future. It's not just for mechanical things like magic items or monster stat blocks, it's also for lore. Recently, only recently, as embarrassing as that is to say, I have started working on my massive lore and history of Eris. This simple document has been my chronicle of my homebrew lore, and it has been very, very helpful. Now, a lot of this is original material that I've just started writing, but much of it is stuff I already wrote a long time ago, and now it's just organized. Having this document has making sure the timeline matches up, making sure the lore is concise and easy to communicate to the players, because now that I have it written down, it's much easier for me to find the language I need to tell the players what's going on in the story. Also, a lot of these lore elements that I'm coming up with now, they may turn into big time quest hooks in the future. This kind of world, this kind of history this kind of organization of story did not seem that important to me even just a month ago. But recently, as I've worked on this document, primarily for a new campaign I'm going to be running for this channel, it has been so helpful, and I cannot recommend it enough. So, physical items, but for me, there are 3 factors to keep in mind. First, money. I can't afford minis, just straight up. I spend my money on other things. And while minis are cool, they're just not something I'm interested in spending 20, 30, 40, 50, hundreds of dollars on. All little tokens I use, these cheap little things, they take time to make. I mean, not a lot of time. I'm sure painting a mini takes way longer, but to cut out a 2D map terrain piece or to put together a token. That's time that I'm not spending balancing encounters, creating NPCs, taking notes for the game. Matter way more than having a fancy paint job on a mini. Is that cool? Yes. And if you get joy out of that, awesome. But for me, I just don't have time to do both. And for me, again, it's just way more important to make sure that the mechanics of the game and the content of the game from a story standpoint are strong rather than working on some DIY crafts. It's just not my thing. But virtual tabletops, they save me in this case. All I gotta do is make the token in my Google Drive and then download it and put it on the VTT. It takes me like 2 minutes. It is so simple. It's not like I don't do anything on the VTT. I mean, I still have to upload stuff, and I like having animated effects on my maps and stuff like that. But those things still take way less time than all the DIY craft projects I was getting myself into. It is so convenient to get a solid VTT. And by a solid VTT, my recommendation will always be Foundry. I know Roll20 is something a lot of people use. However, in my opinion, Roll20 is like vanilla lactose-free Jello. You know, like you can eat it. Yeah, and some people might even think it's good, but it's probably not beating out your actual favorite flavor of ice cream, is it? Yeah, it's edible, but it ain't perfect. It ain't even, in my opinion, that great. Look, Foundry has outpaced Roll20 in a lot of ways. I think a lot of VTTs have outpaced Roll20 in a lot of ways. I think Roll20 is cool. I think it has a fine pricing model, but especially in terms of organization, which is a big reason why I go to VTTs, Roll20 is just not it. Whereas Foundry has a more robust and user-friendly payment system, and the GUI is better, and the organization is better, and I think there's better add-ons. It's just such a great program. And I'm sure there are other VTTs out there that you guys would really love. I've seen that the Bugbear Rodeo is also really cool. Creators of my favorite program ever, Kenku. So yeah, the point is, if you haven't tried VTTs before, I would give them a shot, especially if you're finding yourself running out of time to prep for your games. A good way to save time might be to not work on those minis. Again, though, if you think that's fun for you and you enjoy it, I'm not trying to stop you. But if minis aren't your thing, like me, and you want to work on some kind of easier platform, VTTs make the user experience as a Dungeon Master so much better, and my players love it too. Speaking of all that prep time stuff, a big reason why I like having more prep time is because now my NPCs got depth. I don't want to act like I'm making incredible characters or anything, but when I first started out, I was so nervous about making DMPCs, or making NPCs take up too much of the plot, or making NPCs that become the main characters, that I just made NPCs boring. None of them mattered. None of them had stories or backstories, to say the least. They didn't have many personality traits beyond just like bland and adventurous, I guess. And in terms of notable quirks or appearances, I mean, a lot of them were literally gray elves. Like, they didn't even have a skin tone, for crying out loud. I did not put a lot into these NPCs, and that was, embarrassingly, on purpose. Now, though, I'm very much different. I am shocked, actually, that this is not on the video that I made as the first episode of Crispy's Tavern, because by this point, I was in the middle of my first real D&D campaign, post-horrible RPG horror story, and in that campaign, I did learn this lesson of making NPCs have more depth. A big reason why is because I just started ripping off characters I like. Like, a big reason why I enjoy making NPCs so much is just because I take characters that I like, I take other characters that I like, I start Frankensteining them together and making my own characters. You know, a lot of people like doing that in general, not just in D&D, but in authorship, I'm sure. Making NPCs that you're enthusiastic about based on characters that you love, I mean, it's fun as heck, dude. It's so much more fun for me as a Dungeon Master creating these characters that I like, and then during the gameplay, my players see that. I used to give this advice of, it's really important to keep in mind what your players love when it comes to NPCs and what your players don't. Focus more on NPCs that they love. Start giving them depth. As if you shouldn't be giving them depth beforehand in the first place. Look, the reason my players start getting invested into an NPC is because at baseline, they have depth. My players see this NPC, see that I'm excited about them, see that they have an interesting story that ties into the plot, that ties in their backstories, whatever, and then they get excited. If my players encounter nothing but gray elf blobs, they're not going to get excited at all. It's not that you need to give NPCs depth after your players get interested in them. You need to give NPCs depth so that your players get interested in them. It's why I get so friggin' annoyed when people tell DMs to treat their NPCs like cattle for slaughter who don't really matter. Like, I'm sure there's games that are like that, but I mean, God, the creation of NPCs is just fun in general, and if you don't take joy out of it, I mean, I think you're missing out, and I think your players are going to be missing out too. My players and I share enthusiasm for these characters that exist in this world, and you know what? That makes our group dynamic just so much stronger. Do not be afraid to give NPCs depth. Of course, at the same time, don't make them main character, but there's a long line in between there. Give them depth, give them story, quirks, personality, and trust me, your players are going to love them too. next one's controversial. I know a lot of you guys are already aware, but I really like running intense D&D combats. It's one of my favorite things in the world, making my players sweat, giving them tactical combats that force them to think outside the box and use their abilities in a creative way, to prioritize certain enemies or environmental effects so they can make it through the battle. It's never just multi-attack over and over and over again, but oftentimes I see the advice of, if you're running D&D combat and you don't love it, add story into it. Now, I do not want to demean this advice. It's good advice, okay? When my players are trying to save an NPC that they love during a combat, it makes things so much more intense. My players love that kind of thing. When they're fighting a bad guy that they've gotten to genuinely know and hate, that kind of thing, that brings a lot more depth to the battle. Having story be an important role in the combat, having the combat assist your storytelling, that's amazing, but I feel like in a role-playing game, it's kind of the baseline for a lot of groups. I feel like when you're saying, add role-playing into the role-playing game combat, I don't feel like you're really breaking the mold too much. I feel like that's just normal advice. In my opinion, again, this is just me in the kind of games that I run, but for me, storytelling and role-playing are awesome. They're integral parts of all my combats, or at least I try to make them integral parts of all my combats. However, they never make up for bad encounter design. You need both good encounter design and solid storytelling. Let me explain. So, for example, I'm going to give 2 video games, and then I'm going to give a D&D example, because we've already talked about the D&D example before, so I'm not going to feel too mean about it. For video games, look at something like Crota's End in Destiny. Destiny 1, not Destiny 2. This is way back in 2014, December. I remember when Crota's End first came out. Let me give the context. In this raid, you and 6 other players delve into the heart of the moon. You kill your way through an alien landscape filled with monsters ready to devour your flesh. You rip away the sword of a god, and then you slay him with it under the watchful eye of his father at the heart of his throne. That is epic. It looks epic. I mean, Crota's End, from a visual standpoint, blew me away when I first saw it. Here's the thing, though. The fights were... well, they were kind of bad. Crota's End quickly became a joke amongst the community. I, in my teenage years, 2-manned this 6-man battle. That's how easy it was. In fact, I was so confident I could do it, I did it multiple times. A lot of people solo Crota's End just for the lulz. One guy did it with like a drum pad, I think. I mean, seriously, this fight is just a joke. And even though the context of it is mad cool and Crota's lore is awesome and the environment is sick, it didn't make up for the fact that the encounter was boring and easy. On the opposite hand, take Baldur's Gate 3 in a fight I've complained about plenty. The House of Grief. In this fight, you're assisting Shadowheart, a companion a lot of people love, including myself. I'm sure you guys have noticed. I mean, she is my Baldur's Gate 3 character's love interest. I really care about this character. I love her, and I want to protect her. And in this moment, that's what we're doing. We're taking the NPC down into the depths of her original home and fighting through her old mentor so she can get back to her family. I mean, this is what it's all about. But hot dang, this fight is terrible. Like, it's so frustratingly hard in a way that's just annoying. Darkness spam and AoE radiant effects that just suck. Viconia herself is such a boring boss, and the swarm of minions with their darkness and their like a bajillion necrotic damage is just a slog to get through. I mean, after 4 or 5 times beating the fight because I wanted practice, I've learned how to fold it, but frankly, even now, even after I know how to do it easy, it still annoys me. Even though the story, the situation, the characters, they're all amazing, it didn't make up for the fact the fight was kind of balls. Okay, Crispy, those are video games. What about D&D? Well, take Taz Graduation. Taz Graduation was an actual play run by the McElroys? I don't really care. Look, they're great guys. I like the content they make. They seem nice, but I do think that this was a dud. And a big part of it was because the combats were bad. I mean, to listen to and I assume to play through, a lot of them were just 1 hit point enemies that went down in 1 hit. They didn't really matter. The combat just seemed kind of tacked on. If you tack on combat to story, just like pin it there, and just don't care about it, if every enemy is just a bag of hit points with a multi-attack, I'm not going to care about it. No matter how good the story is, they should be working together. Combat should not just be tacked on. You gotta think about it too. Think about the story aspects, obviously. But beyond that, think about the design. How does the enemy's abilities synergize with each other? Like, for example, maybe an enemy that summons in minions that empower their attacks, therefore forcing the player to divide their attention, taking on the minions so that the monster doesn't hit them with some kind of status condition. Maybe the status condition is something that's forced, and instead of making a saving throw, the players need to find a certain element of the environment to purge the effect. These kind of minor mechanics make the fights so much more engaging. Also, make your players sweat a little bit. Don't be afraid to knock them down if you peg. Give them some damage. I mean, seriously, not every combat needs to be deadly, but your players should be at least a little nervous. Come on, try it out at least once. So often DMs are afraid of hurting their players, but trust me, I think your players can take it, as long as you tell them about it. I have had so much fun running intense D&D combats. I have fully embraced the style. I mean, at first, let me tell you, I didn't think I was a combat-heavy DM. I didn't think my combats were that big of a deal. It's only after I started DMing outside my immediate bubble that I realized this. However, at this point, I fully embrace this identity because I think it's fun. I think it's awesome. Try it out at least once. And even if you don't, make sure that your story and combat are working together and neither is simply tacked onto the other. Okay, finally, this is when we talk about an RPG horror stories literally all the time. And again, I can't believe it wasn't on this list because by this point I've already learned this lesson. But I had an RPG horror story that was bad. It was really bad. And I let it fester for like, 14, 15, maybe 20 sessions. It was ridiculous, okay? And you know what? Even though it was a terrible experience, I am glad I had it because I learned a very valuable lesson. Dude, your problems ain't gonna solve themselves. Okay, this isn't a D&D thing. This is a life thing, all right? The world deviates towards chaos. Entropy is its natural form. Things do not just work out. You must enforce order upon your life. Okay, putting aside the strange metaphysical lecture I just went on for no freaking reason, the point is that your problems don't solve themselves. If you have a problem player at a table or something that you're sweating about at your table, talk to your players about it ASAP. I remember that after our second session number 2, dude, my players were already telling me that, hey, this guy's kind of an issue. And I was like, oh, I'll talk to him, we'll figure it out. And when he blew me off, I kind of just took that. Well, why? Why did I do that? I should have pressed. I should have gone, hey, wait, don't blow me off. This is a serious thing. I mean, yeah, it's a game, but at the same time, I mean, this is friendship we're talking about here. We can't just put this to the side. But you know what? That's what we all kind of ended up doing. That's what I did as the Dungeon Master, and that was a mistake. We see it countless times in RPG horror stories. I've seen it in my life. But even small things, you know, you gotta solve the small things too. I mean, one time, a player of mine, he kind of recommended a torture method that clearly made some of my players uncomfortable. But I talked to him afterwards. I just shot him a text and asked him, hey dude, what was that about? And he said, look, sorry, it was a spur of the moment type of thing. I definitely shouldn't have said that. That was my bad. Won't happen again. And then boom, problem solved. Never had another one since then. One text message sorted that whole thing out. Number 1, looser prep is more effective. I hope this doesn't mean lesser prep is more effective, because I think that is bad advice. You should prep to your comfort level, and for me, that's prepping a decent amount. My encounters have a lot of notes, because again, there's a lot going on, tactically, mechanically, all that stuff. So I put notes on that, just so I remember. However, in terms of story, I let my players go in pretty much any direction they want a lot of the time. There is a general direction for the campaign. There are goals they need to accomplish, and I'm pretty sure I can predict where they're going to go. But in the immediate session, they have a lot of openness in what they want to do. And you know what? I allow for that. Looser prep, in this case, I hope, I haven't rewatched the video, but I'm pretty sure I was saying that you should make sure to allow for your players to take their own paths and make sure that your plans aren't so rigid that they can't adapt to those paths. You don't need to throw out everything you do. The best DMs out there are good at recycling. Okay, next up, establish rules. Session 0, basically what I'm trying to say here. I didn't do this for my Curse of Strahd RPG horror story campaign, but I have done this in every other campaign since. And by the way, Session Zero is freaking fun. Okay, me and my friends all got together in my place. We were sitting in my living room with our D&D books, all making characters while listening to some lo-fi. We got sushi afterwards, and it was freaking awesome. Like, people say Session Zeros are boring, and oh, what are you gonna do the whole time? I don't know, man. Talk to your friends. I'm not trying to be mean. I mean, I'm trying to be mean a little bit, because I literally don't get it. I mean, these people are my friends. They're people I care about. I mean, it doesn't matter if we're doing something mundane like making characters. We're together. I mean, we like each other, and that makes it fun as heck. I love Session Zero, man. It was a really great memory in my head. So yeah, I stick to that one. Next up, don't overwhelm yourself. Definitely agree on this one. Don't do too much. Take breaks, etc., etc. I really don't think there's much to be said there. Next up, players do not need to roll for everything, something that D&D YouTubers harp on all the time. That includes myself. So again, not going to talk too much about that. And finally, don't worry about the price floor. Something I actually agree with even more now, considering how little I spend on Dungeons & Dragons materials. I almost never buy D&D stuff anymore, just because I spend a lot of time just using what I already have or making my own stuff. I've started homebrewing monsters, and it's been so much fun. I actually recommend it. It makes me better at encounter design, game design, and understanding the rules way more. And when you have your own monsters that wrap into your story, makes that way more fun to run too. Man, we blazed through those. I think old me, they had some decent takes. But here I am, just one fool, 100 episodes later. I thank you guys so much for everything. I mean, this has changed my life for the better, made me so much more enthusiastic about these games, and there's a lot of personal stuff that Crispy's Tavern helped me out with I can't really talk about because they're personal, but just know that you guys matter a lot to me. This job matters a lot to me. I love what I do, and as long as you guys are here, I'll keep on doing it. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out, hey, go watch Tabletop Tavern Tips. Go celebrate this amazing series. I know it's not as popular as RPG Horror Stories, but it's important here on the channel. It's part of our identity. Go check it out. Whole thing's linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment 100 later to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.